Hello, and welcome back to my channel. So today I thought it would be fun to do future nostalgia for Eras Analyzed. One, because I obviously love the album, and two, because I've been waiting to do it for a little while and thought it would be perfect to do it now because it could be a little pregame for radical optimism, if you will. And we have a ton to talk about because a lot went down in this era, so we're just gonna get ahead into it. But before we do, I just want to give my typical Eras Analyzed disclaimer. If you're not new here, you know it, and it's that these videos are not like a track-by-track album review, but rather a retrospective of the era in its entirety. So let's go ahead and get back into future nostalgia. As one does nowadays to announce a new era, Dua cleared her feedback in October of 2019, signifying a new album was underway. In addition, she debuted a new hairstyle, going blonde on top and keeping her natural dark hair on the bottom. She captioned some photos showing off the look, a new era, tagging them DL2, which confirmed that new album was coming. And by the end of the month, actually on Halloween of that year, Dua dropped her album's lead single, Don't Start Now. The new disco song is about freeing oneself after a partner and finding solace in your solitude or out on the dance floor, just anywhere but in them because they wasted their chance. So moved on, it's scary. I'm not where you left me at all. I noticed, especially at this point, though she had songs covering other topics, the Too Bad, So Sad You Lost Me post-breakup songs were performing very well for Dua, thinking of things like New Rules and IDGAF from her debut album. I know a lot of people consider this era the start of her using the disco sounds, disco lipa as I like to call it, but it's something that she dabbled with already, with Blow Your Mind for example, but this feels like a more concentrated step into the disco realm, honestly a lot more new disco sounds because this era was very 80s inspired. But Dua and her team were inspired to write Don't Start Now because of Gloria Gaynor's disco classic, I Will Survive. Both songs are framed around being put down and doubted, thinking the speaker would be nothing without the relationship they've left, and then making it very clear that they're going to be more than fine. In the video, Dua spends a night on the dance floor under the neon lights, clad in equally saturated Versace looks. Dua had already been working with them, having worn Versace to the Met Gala earlier that year and the Grammys, where she took home Best New Artist. Don't Start Now was a critical success for Dua, with reviews praising her seeming evolution as an artist and bringing back that disco sound that hadn't been popular for years.
I feel like it properly describes everything that's to come with the next record. It's got a theme going through it. It's more disco orientated, 80s inspired. It's fun. It's honest lyrics, but not taking myself too seriously. I just want people when they hear it just to want to dance and just to have fun and just to go out and spend time with their friends.
At the time, the single cracked the top 5 on several charts, peaking at number 2 on both the UK singles charts and on the Hot 100. Just days after the song's release, Dua performed Don't Start Now at the EMAs. I always loved this setup because it's so simple yet so pleasing. What really stood out to a lot of people though was the dance break that Dua performed during the song's break. This is because at this point, Dua had been teased for her stage presence and dance skills to the point where some of her performances have become memes, the most popular one being the Go Girl, Give Us Nothing. And Dua has said at the time the criticisms and the jokes hurt her, later saying in 2020, "For a short period of time, it messed with my mental health. I'd go on stage and if somebody was filming me, in my head it wasn't like, oh, they're filming me because they want to keep it. I was like, they're going to film it so they can laugh at me or something." But it was definitely for the better that she took some of the more genuine criticism to heart and used it to improve, and people are still pointing that out a couple years later. On December 1st of that year, Dua revealed the album's title, Future Nostalgia, by posting to Instagram a tattoo of her arm with the song's title. And back at the EMAs the previous month, she had hinted to the album's title and concept, saying, "It's quite nostalgic and disco elements, but I wanted it to sound fresh, new, and still current, but I'm experimenting and having fun." In that post announcing the album's title, she also announced the European leg of the tour would start that following April, which of course would be postponed. A couple weeks after this, Dua released Future Nostalgia, the album's title track, as a promotional single with Don't Start Now as the B-side. This one, I will admit, was a grower for me. This Jeff Bhasker produced song actually works as the album's thesis in a sense, and the song was written after Dua told Jeff and the rest of her team the title for that album. It was actually the first song written for the album and blends everything from funk to disco to synth pop to a smidge of hip hop. And when reading reviews of the song, it came up several times that Prince and the Pointer Sisters were likely some sort of influence for this song. Throughout the song, Dua switches from singing on the chorus to melodically talking out the verses, putting the right amount of attitude in to get her point across. She opens Future Nostalgia singing, "You want a timeless song? I want to change the game," combining the goals of the album, what she wants to do, and what the fans probably want to hear. And throughout the accompanying lyric video, Dua traipses and drinks her way through a glass mansion, which is referenced in the lyrics, and the lyrics and shots themselves slide across the screen like closing credits in an 80s movie. And fun fact, for a little while, Dua was actually planning to call this album Glass House. In some shots in the Future Nostalgia lyric video, Dua wears a power suit, another 80s fashion staple, seen prominently at the points where she calls herself a female alpha, and she says can't teach a man how to wear his pants. Dua said she actually didn't really feel like a female alpha herself when writing the lyrics, but hoped this album would help her to embody that. Physical, Future Nostalgia's official second single, came at the end of January of 2020. This one has a darker sound to me, like you're almost being commanded to get out on the dance floor and dance for your life. And to be fair, Dua does tell us to keep on dancing like we ain't got a choice. Physical was heavily inspired by 80s film and music, with Flashdance and the Eurythmics being cited as direct inspirations for the song. I always thought the song interpolated Olivia Newton-John's Physical, but Dua later said that connection wasn't intentional actually, though it did end up being yet another nod, and none of the writers or producers for Olivia's version are credited on Dua's. Opposite to Don't Start Now, this song is about the intoxicating beginning of a relationship where you feel almost magnetically drawn to the person. The video captures this really well, with Dua and her dancers spinning around this rainbow warehouse set that feels like their own planet of dance. Dua actually makes a point to dance quite a bit in this video as well, and are cut with some animated shots. And animations do actually make up quite a bit of the visuals for this era. Dua also released an 80s style home workout video to promote Physical. I think this speaks really well to the Future Nostalgia concept, giving us something a bit more modern with the official video, with some nostalgia elements, but then really going overt with the nostalgia in the second video. Some shots are perfectly grainy, and Dua interjects a few times, calling out the steps, which we can also see in big block letters on the screen. Physical again received positive reviews, heightening anticipation for Dua's new album, and anticipation for how she would continue to reinterpret genres like 80s dance music and synth pop, aside from the disco showcased on the previous single. I had no idea Physical only peaked at number 60 in the US, I just assumed it did better. It definitely peaked higher on my Spotify, but in the UK, this one did about as well as Don't Start Now, peaking at number 3 on the singles chart. NME called Physical the second best song of 2020, and Physical was nominated for Song of the Year at the Brit Awards. The song also got a remix with Hwasa, with her singing in both English and Korean. The production seems mostly the same, but seems to pull away a bit on some of Hwasa's verses to allow her voice to stand out more. I think out of all the songs on Future Nostalgia, save Levitating after it blew up, this one got promoted the most, with the most collabs, the multiple videos, and photo shoots. And speaking of the photo shoot for this single, this Marine Stare bodysuit that Dua's wearing is so unironically dated because it was just everywhere in like 2020, 2021. Beyonce had it in a video, Blackpink wore them, they were everywhere. I think one of her collaborators on Jill wore one in one of their cover arts. I wanted one so bad, but I still like them a lot, and it fits the concept, so hey. And you know what, maybe I would say this song got more promotional assets actually, because it didn't get near the amount of TV or award show performances as singles like Don't Start Now or Levitating, despite it being released about 6 weeks before the world went into lockdown. But it's still possible this could have impacted that, so who knows. The same day as Physical, Dua revealed the cover for Future Nostalgia. The cover shows Dua at the wheel of a vintage car, possibly driving through the cosmos, evidenced by the moon in the background. The darkness of the cover kind of touches on the darkness a lot of the songs on the album have in their production. Not necessarily darkness as a negative, but they sort of remind you of nighttime, whether that's being outside under the moon and stars or under the disco ball on a crowded dance floor. And moonlight is a very prominent reference both in the lyrics and a lot of visuals for this era. The cover was shot by photographer Hugo Comte, who Dua said that she's a huge fan of. He actually did the single shoots for this entire era, I think, too, and a shoot outside of the cover shoot. I love the perspective in his shots. Like, obviously the photograph is 2D, you know it's 3D in real life, but he's very good at still capturing that flatness. Like, Dua looks superimposed into all of these photos, even though she's not. There's also something about the way the photos are edited, like there's just enough graininess in them, and they're just undersaturated enough to look like a print ad or poster. In that same tweet revealing the album cover, Dua announced the album would be out on April 3rd, but Future Nostalgia actually came out a week earlier on March 27th. This is because the entire album leaked in addition to some of the other songs and demos that had leaked a few months earlier. And by this time, the world had been in lockdown for about 2 weeks, throwing another massive wrench into rollout plans. Her tour was obviously delayed, and her slot at Glastonbury and her SNL performance were also cancelled. But Dua would eventually get to perform on SNL in January of 2021.
Now, because everything's been put to a stop, it kind of made me rethink. But then I also remember the reason why I made this record was to get away from any like anxiety or any pressures of making a second album. And I made it with so much love, and I had so much fun making it, and I made it with my friends, and it just made me happy and made me want to dance. And I was like, maybe I'm just, maybe the time is to put it out now.
Personally, I do remember driving around with the windows down and listening to this album all the time, because while you couldn't be at the clubs or parties really listening to it, a lot of the songs are still fun to drive around to. Or, just dance in your room and mentally transport yourself back to happier times. In its first week on the official album charts, Future Nostalgia debuted at number 2, beat narrowly by 5 Seconds of Summer's album Calm. Future Nostalgia did hit number 1 in its second week, though. And in the US, the album debuted at number 4 in the Hot 100, dropping at number 8 the following week, but it peaked at number 3 nearly a year later when Dua performed at the Grammys. The week of the album's release, Break My Heart, Future Nostalgia's third single, arrived. This one is yet another danceable relationship-themed song, one questioning whether Dua's new flame is ill-fated. She said the song was about feeling scared to be too happy in a relationship and waiting for the other shoe to drop. Dua said this single was special to her, and she called it dance crying to a T, which is how she described a lot of the tracks on Future Nostalgia, actually. Break My Heart interpolates the famous guitar riff from INXS's 1987 song Need You Tonight.
I knew that was the end of it all. I should have stayed at home, 'cause now there ain't no letting you go.
And aside from the obvious disco influence, the song's got a funk inspiration too, and like I said, the track is undeniably danceable. Break My Heart has my favorite music video from the Future Nostalgia era. I love how she's dressed in those colorful, coordinated sets like a character from Clueless, or maybe Heathers if we want to pick an 80s reference. And I love how colorful and saturated the video is overall, and I feel like I'm going to say saturated a lot in this video, and how the sets feel almost cartoonish, like those sitcom sets that are meant to look real, but it's definitely obviously a set. I also noticed that in the carpet and the plane scene, we get a nod to The Shining, a classic horror mystery from the 80s. Maybe that's meant to express that despite everything seeming pretty normal, Dua's got an odd feeling about the relationship, even in the beginning, and how she feels disoriented by it, even if this is her own creation. I also like the allusions here and the transitions between the sets, like the falling out of the plane shot, and especially the one where she's on the dance floor and then it turns into one of the pips on the dominoes. Break My Heart secured Dua her third top 10 from this album in the UK, where the song peaked at number 6. And this one fared better in the US than Physical, as it peaked at number 13. And because of lockdown, Dua's pretty open in live streams that this phase of promoting her album wasn't going to be able to go as planned. Her manager at the time said there was no real point in a lot of the traditional rollout methods like purchasing billboards, because no one was going to be outside looking at these billboards, and instead it would be more feasible to do virtual things like breaking down her songs online. And because of filming restrictions, the next single, Hallucinate, got an animated music video. And other singles like Levitating and Break My Heart also did get animated music videos, but I do believe Hallucinate was the only single that didn't get a live music video. It shows Dua performing in a sort of traditional cartoon style, along with bright colors and topsy-turvy sets meant to evoke hallucinations on set by a flower whose scent Dua inhales. This video was inspired by Studio 54 and the heyday of disco. And Hallucinate itself is a fun disco house dance track in which Dua compares her lover to a hallucinatory drug and makes it very clear that they see her the same way. The song is entrancing and evokes that feeling of being able to be on the dance floor all night long, maybe encouraged by some substances. And this is actually one of the tracks on Future Nostalgia that was produced by Stuart Price, who had a heavy hand in Madonna's Confessions on a Dance Floor, working on all but one of the tracks. I was going to say that though I like Hallucinate a lot, I had no idea that it was ever a single from this album and didn't remember it being one, and that's because it actually wasn't in the US. But in the UK, the song peaked at number 31. At the end of August, Club Future Nostalgia, the remix album came, produced by the Blessed Madonna. Overall, the remixes upped the tempo of the already danceable tracks, adding more bass to them, and extending the mixes to give all of the featured artists time to shine. Since this album was put together in 2020, the featured artists recorded their parts with separate mixes, and then the Blessed Madonna mixed the final products together. The album has 2 new songs on it, Love is Religion and That Kind of Woman, the latter of which would appear in an unremixed version on the yet-to-be-released deluxe album. One thing I like about this album is that it actually sounds like being in the club, like 2 songs that you actually know will be remixed into the other. For example, Holla Back Girl opening up the Hallucinate remix. I was sure this was because Gwen and her team cleared the sample because she appears on the Physical remix in the album. And actually the reverse happened. Dua's team got in touch to clear Holla Back Girl, and Dua said they were just like, well, while we're at it, we'll ask Gwen to be on the album. And this remix of Physical is actually one of the tracks on the album that lowers the song's tempo, but I do still like it.
I got you, so come on, come on, come on. Let's get physical.
And I do think it's smart that if you're going to make an album inspired by a genre of music where remixing was very popular, almost integral I would say, that you actually do some remixes yourself. The Levitating remix is one of the most popular tracks on this album, likely in part due to the Madonna and Missy Elliott collaboration. Though the entire Club Future Nostalgia album got an animated visualizer, I think this is the only track that also got a music video. And the video was shot earlier in the spring using real couples in order to comply with restrictions. And Missy, who also appears in the video, filmed her part separately and then sent it in and had it edited into the video.
Like I'm a freak, I like to play shy, but I will get it poppin', anything, I'll try it.
And while we're speaking about Levitating, this was Future Nostalgia's 5th single, and it was made a single in October of 2020. The version that was made into a single was also remixed, this time with DaBaby. This is another disco escapism offering with elements of electro and funk, and it perfectly captures the feeling of traversing through the cosmos or being so elevated on the dance floor or in such a euphoric state you feel like you're levitating. This is one of those songs on the album that blends electronic production and live instrumentation, with the synthesizer being very prominent in the backing vocals on this track, transporting you back a few decades.
All night, come on, dance with me. I'm levitating. Fly away with me tonight.
The song was written and recorded in one studio session, and Dua said that this is one of the songs that really set the tone for the rest of the album's sound. In Levitating, we again get direct references to Moonlight, as Dua says in the chorus, and she opens up the song singing, "If you want to run away with me, I know a galaxy and I can take you for a ride." Really reminds me of the album cover because it looks exactly like what she's doing in the song. The music video for this version of the song also has a similar theme, with Dua entering a portal into a dance party in outer space. The video was a collaboration with TikTok, and their logo is prominently seen on the elevator that Dua and the dancers enter in the beginning of the video. The video went on to inspire the Levitating challenge on TikTok, making the song even more popular on social media. I can't remember if this song was made a single because it was already picking up steam on social media. I'm pretty sure that is the case because I remember the song being a fan favorite even when the album came out. And that might explain why it was also chosen as the lead for Club Future Nostalgia. Either way, Levitating shot quickly up the charts, becoming the Hot 100 song of 2021. However, on the weekly charts, it only ever achieved a peak position of number 2, which it would do over a year after Future Nostalgia's release, technically making it a sleeper hit. Though the version with DaBaby had become the most popular one, after homophobic remarks he made at Rolling Loud, his credit from the song was pulled, and promotion shifted to Dua's original solo version of Levitating. Luckily, this didn't really hurt the song's momentum, as it had already gone viral and achieved its peak position. And with the song charting for 77 weeks, it earned Dua the record of longest charting song on the Hot 100 for a female artist. Dua and her team have actually been sued a few times for Levitating, with 2 of the lawsuits being filed in the same week. The first came from the band Article Sound System, who claimed Dua copied their song Live Your Life.
All night, party, sunrise now, don't stop till you.
The second came from the songwriters of the 1979 song Wiggle and Giggle All Night.
He said, I love the way you wiggle and I love the way you giggle and I'd love to give you just a little kiss on your lip.
In June of 2023, Article Sound System dropped their lawsuit. But that August, another lawsuit was brought against Dua and her team for using an unauthorized talkbox sample on Levitating. Bosco Conte, the artist, claimed that he made the sample using the original version of the song, but didn't give clearance for it to be used in any remixes. Conte's lawyer claimed, all 3 remixes sampled and incorporated a greater amount of plaintiff's work than that used in the original version. Defendants did not seek or receive any authorization or permission to use the composition or sound recording of plaintiff's work from plaintiff. And I wasn't able to find any updates regarding this case past August, so I'm not sure if the lawsuit is still in effect, and I don't think Dua's camp commented. Throughout November, Dua continued with live virtual performances to promote Future Nostalgia. She filmed a glittering performance of Levitating in London that was broadcast at that year's AMAs. And to fully capitalize on the blend of disco with modern pop and dance music, she hosted Studio 2054, a live stream concert. The event actually holds the Guinness World Record for highest ticket sales for a paid live stream by a female artist, and honestly, I didn't know that was a record that existed to be broken, but she had over 5 million guests in attendance. The event was hosted partly to make up for her postponed tour and included guest performers like Miley Cyrus, FKA Twigs, Elton John, Kylie Minogue, Bad Bunny, and the Blessed Madonna. The show was filmed inside of London's Printworks, which is a large warehouse, and different sets were created to capture the look and feel of each of the songs performed. The show was purposely filmed with 80s-style camera lenses and used a format reminiscent of TV shows from that time period, which is reportedly what got Dua on board. Initially, Dua didn't want to do Studio 2054, thinking that fans would prefer to pay for concert tickets instead when they could see her in person rather than through a screen. The show was divided into 3 acts and an encore, with Dua performing some of her collaborations with other artists rather than exclusively future nostalgia tracks. And several of Dua's own songs had other songs remixed into them for the event, like Daft Punk's Technologic being mixed into Hallucinate, I Feel Love and Break My Heart, and parts of ABBA's Gimme 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 being included in Don't Start Now. Coincidentally, it's the same part that's sampled in Madonna's Hung Up. And it looks like the only songs from Future Nostalgia left off of this set list for Studio 2054 were Good in Bed and Love Again. And Good in Bed is another upbeat pop song in which Dua sings about someone she probably has no business being with but enjoys sleeping with, so it's very hard to break off the relationship.
We drive each other mad, 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 mad. But baby, that's what makes us good in bed.
Something about the song, I don't mind it, but it feels out of place on the album in a way that I can't put my finger on. And if we're being honest, I also feel that way about Boys Will Be Boys. Like, they're not bad songs, but they're definitely not ones that I personally reach for when listening to this album. But surprisingly, I actually don't feel this way about the quote-unquote slower songs on the album, which I would consider to be Pretty Please and Love Again. Dua herself has framed them as outliers on the album, saying, I've been describing this album as a dancercise class. It keeps you moving. Some mid-tempo bits that give me a bit of a breather when I'm on tour, but I've been a little relentless with this one. And you know what? Maybe she meant Boys Will Be Boys also, because I do think that's probably the slowest song on the album. Pretty Please, however, which comes in the middle of Future Nostalgia, is one of the first pace changes. And like I was saying earlier, I wouldn't say it's really a slow song, maybe more mid-tempo, but different from a song like Cool, lyrically it's more open and vulnerable, especially in comparison with those earlier tracks. Dua's vocals are more subdued here too, even though she's singing in a higher register in the verses, we don't get a lot of the more powerful, forceful vocals that are all over a lot of the other tracks. Rather, that force comes from the punching percussion and bass playing throughout the verses. Also different from a lot of the F you, I'll be fine without you, actually I love you, I'm obsessed with you that's present in a lot of the songs on this album. Pretty Please kind of expresses Dua's needier side.
Cause I miss ya and I need your love. When my mind is running wild, could you help me slow it down?
It's similar to Break My Heart in that there's this clear sense of being in love but also being afraid of it. And toward the end of Pretty Please, things pick up a bit, like Dua's finally let herself go when we get to that electronic break. I also love how metallic the production sounds overall, and it sounds like we get a return of that cowbell used in Don't Start Now. I always think of Pretty Please and Love Again, which is actually the album's final single, as sister songs. Like, Pretty Please is the trepidation over the new relationship, and Love Again is when you're finally settled in and comfortable and can enjoy the relationship. This is basically confirmed in the lyrics when Dua sings, Never have I ever met somebody like you, used to be afraid of love and what it might do. Again, other than in the pre-chorus, that bridge and the final note in the end, Dua's mainly singing in her lower register, which I do prefer because I love her deeper voice. We also get those punching kick drums throughout the song, but my favorite part of the production are those synthy sounding strings that spin around the song's opening and throughout the chorus.
You got me in love again.
And those are actually sampled from a 1932 song called My Woman. Like, overall, it's a song that's very slow and steady and sure of itself, and though it's slightly less dancey than a lot of the other offerings on Future Nostalgia, that feeling of euphoria is still there. And as loved up as this song sounds, I've always interpreted the clown makeup she's wearing in the video as sort of an answer that maybe this relationship that Dua's singing about still wasn't all that she thought it was, though when she was in the moment, she really thought this person was the one. And you know, of course, based on the overall theme of the music video, it's definitely also a reference to being a rodeo clown.
I was going through a bunch of personal shit. You know, some things need to end, and I need to manifest a new positive energy in my life. And does it sound like I'm talking in code? Because I'm clearly talking about a relationship and I'm talking about love.
And I don't know if I've ever named a favorite song on this album, even just alone by myself, but Love Again is definitely a contender. And if it's not my favorite, it is at least in the top 3. And that's just on the standard version at least, because in February of 2021, Dua released the Moonlight edition of Future Nostalgia, which includes some new songs, some remixes, and some collaborations like Prisoner from that era, which she did during Future Nostalgia era, but they weren't for her album. This is one of my favorite deluxe albums from recent times because it is one of the few where I listen to the deluxe tracks just as much as the standard ones. And I honestly think I may have played If It Ain't Me just as much, if not more, than a lot of the songs on the standard version of Future Nostalgia. Fever and We're Good are also favorites. We're Good because it's a fun song to sing or yell if you're me in the car when you're driving. And I also like the music video, which is a play on the meme like, oh, the lobster in the Titanic would be excited when the Titanic sank and they can go back to the ocean. This one does lean into the nostalgia with the reggae and bossa nova elements, but it's not really in the disco realm like the majority of the standard version tracks. And then in terms of styling in the music video, the 1920s inspiration was actually inspired by the 2013 adaptation of The Great Gatsby, so a more modern take on that Art Deco flapper style that was popular in the time period. Despite Fever evoking a lot of warmth, the song being about being pressed up against somebody, having a fever, the electronic production adds such an element of coolness to this song. There's a lot of negative space in it also, at least vocally, which allows you to focus on the escalating, maybe piano sound, I'm not sure, and the other drippy sound effects in the production.
I've got a fever, so can you check?
Dua is joined by Belgian singer Angèle, who sings her part in French. And this song reminds me of the sleek pop songs a lot of the indie European girls are making in like 2017, 2018, and I mean that in the best way possible. But yes, overall, I am a big fan of the Moonlight edition. The songs are another interpretation of that future nostalgia concept, but not necessarily distinct enough to warrant their own project. The following month in March, Dua performed a future nostalgia medley at that year's Grammys. She opened the performance with Levitating, wearing a dazzling pink Versace robe, before transitioning to a matching blazer and ending the performance with Don't Start Now in a two-piece bodysuit. She also wore a Versace gown on the red carpet with this cute butterfly motif on the bodice. And at the ceremony, Dua took home the award for Best Pop Vocal Album, though she lost her nomination for Album of the Year. A couple months later in May, Dua also performed at the Brit Awards, where she took home the award for British Album and British Female Soloist of the Year. This custom Vivienne Westwood look is one of my favorite red carpet looks from her. It's got that quirky campiness that's typical of Vivienne's looks and that Dua herself really leaned into in this era. Like, it's silly, it's playful, but it's still put together and a little sexy also. It's a look that doesn't take itself seriously, but was edited enough to not look like a caricature. For her performance at the ceremony, Dua kept the same hair and opens the performance in this custom gingham trench coat I also love. This is also Vivienne Westwood, all the looks are. The following two looks heavily feature the Union Jack, obviously a nod to the ceremony and Dua herself being British. The flag is also a staple in a lot of Vivienne's designs. And throughout the medley, Dua makes her way from a crowded train station to a set of one to an LED dance floor accompanied by a host of dancers. And for this medley, she performed Physical, Hallucinate, Love Again, Pretty Please, and Don't Start Now. And finally, in February of 2022, over 2 years after initially announcing it, Dua embarked on the Future Nostalgia Tour. It was supported by special guests including Caroline Polachek, Megan Thee Stallion, and Lolo Zouai. This set was a saturated spectacle, making use of a lot of colored lighting and neon signage. Dua herself, who had long since returned to her dark hair, opted for long waves for the tour and a revolving door of brightly colored or glittering bodysuits. My all-time favorites are the Black Mugler bodysuits. They look absolutely perfect on her, especially combined with this hair. I can't decide if I like the one with or without the metallic fringe the most, but the black ones are my favorites for sure. And reviews of the tour were mostly positive, with critics saying the tour was worth the wait, and Dua's stage presence and performance ability had noticeably improved from her first tour, which wrapped up in 2018. In their review, Variety called it a real pop diva arena concert, going on to say, "Dancing has never been Dua's greatest strength, so the show's design wisely makes her the strutting, statuesque center, emphasizing her real power points, her voice and presence, while the dancers orbit around her in an ever-morphing, multi-limbed swarm that's both exhilarating and exhausting to watch. The choreography, led by Charm LaDonna, is truly next level." Across 4 legs and 91 shows, the tour grossed over $100 million and brought in over 1.3 million guests. Overall, the Future Nostalgia era will be remembered as one of the first pop eras we got from the new decade, with British GQ calling it the decade's first great pop album. Aside from the songs being good and performing well, it's actually an example of an album that transcended mostly being consumed online and had quote-unquote real-world popularity, so to speak. Like, I doubt the general public knows all of the songs from the album, but I'm sure at this point almost everyone on earth has heard Levitating and might be familiar with another single or two. And in that British GQ article, the author David Leavesley calls Future Nostalgia the latest in a long lineage of meaty, delectable pop albums by women who just want you to have fun. And the album definitely is fun. On top of that, it's been remembered as one of the first to usher in that disco pop wave and synth pop revival. This would later become sort of a double-edged sword for Dua because, like I said at the beginning of the video, she had a couple songs prior that leaned into this disco revival sound, but I think she did fully realize it here on Future Nostalgia. Like in this album, it feels like she found her sound in her lane. But because it became a trend and other artists started emulating the sound, I think saying they copied her would be a stretch. I do think people either way became fed up of the sound a lot quicker, leading them to start wanting something new from pop in general after a year or two, and that meant from Dua also. So when she started teasing radical optimism, everyone was like, oh, no more disco, to the point where Dua herself, and I quote, said, oh fuck, I'm moving away from disco for my new album. I was like, maybe I've got one more in me, and this was when she was talking about making Dance of the Night. And having heard the few singles out for Radical Optimism so far, it seems like instead of moving away from disco, she's instead moved past it, delving deeper into the new disco and post-disco sounds, but very much still in that retro ballpark. One of my favorite things about the Future Nostalgia era is that it's one of the outputs this decade that's felt like an actual era. And I think Dua achieves this overall by switching up her hairstyle and font for each era, which she's now on her third time doing. But beyond that, truly leaning into the 80s inspiration with her styling on red carpets, doing things like the workout video for Physical, all of the remixes, the entire remix album, and even trying to evoke the 80s with the camera lenses was all very well thought out. And that's of course in addition to the album itself and the very obvious 80s samples and interpolations throughout. And one thing that helped was that this era was very long too, because from Don't Start Now to the end of the tour, that was about 3 years. And it's likely the case the era was never planned out to be this long, but it did allow time for the singles to breathe and for Dua and her team to adapt and put out new singles and make remixes of the songs as a little refresher and a treat. And I appreciate there was a lot of reinvention even in this era, rather than running Don't Start Now or Physical into the ground for a year, for example, and then not showing the other songs as much love. And also because this era was so long, it gave fans time to let the music resonate, for them to really take it in and decide if they enjoyed it, and making them more likely to want to see it live, be it in that Studio 2054 live stream or actually live on tour. And in regards to the Future Nostalgia tour, I did touch on it a little bit, but overall I was wondering if it actually helped more than hurt that the tour was, 2 years after the album came out? Because one, well, this is the case of a tour that we knew was going to happen at some point in the indefinite future because it had been postponed, but you have more time to save up your money. Also, you have more time to listen to the album and decide if you want to go see it live, whereas nowadays the album will come out Friday, and by the next Friday a lot of these artists announce their tours, and I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I want to see this live yet. Or one thing, not to go on a tangent, but a little bit, one thing that really gets me, is like when they announce the tour or the tickets go on sale, but the album is going to come out after. And I'm like, don't do that to me because I don't know. And then it's like, if I were to buy the ticket, I'm just going to have to hope that you perform like your previous hits that I liked. But anyway, I bet that helped because, everyone who's going to listen to your album is not going to listen in the first week that it's out. And you have more time to do live performances and promotions. I was trying to say both of those words simultaneously. And just so more people might want to buy the tickets to your show when it comes around. I don't know, just a thought. But yeah, again, overall, let me know your thoughts. Let me know your feelings on Future Nostalgia. Dua did not intend it, but I feel like that's a perfect little phrase for this media throwback cycle that we're in now, where everything is a reboot, a remake, an adaptation of an adaptation, if you will. And also, since this album was like disco, dance pop, 80s synth pop, check out my Recession Pop video if you've not. I think it's a fun one, so help me out. As always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so that you can stick around for more. And if you'd like to become a channel member and get early access to videos, the link is in the description. Again, thank you so much for watching. I love you all so very much, and we'll see you so very soon. Bye-bye.